Today, I want to talk about 12 things that only Americans do, but they think it's normal. Number 1, celebrate everything. Now, when I say everything, I mean everything. They celebrate what they call gender reveals. They celebrate graduating preschool, which is the equivalent of primary school. They celebrate anniversaries, promotion, fair point, and they celebrate things like catching a big fish. Americans just need an excuse to celebrate. Everything has to be a big grand event. It's just a staple in the culture, and they think it's completely normal, but looking at it from the outside, it's kind of crazy and obsessive, in my opinion. Number 2, having pharmacies that sell medication and drugs that also sell groceries. So it's kind of like the equivalent of a Boots here in the UK selling cereal and milk. Yeah, you don't really see that here completely. Pharmacies in the US like CVS or Rite Aid, which are big chain pharmacies throughout the country, tend to also sell groceries and candy and holiday goods and toys and clothes and pretty much anything you can think of on a small scale. And now that I think about it and I look back on it, I'm like, yeah, why? I guess a one-stop shop thought process, but you can't really get every grocery item, just like you can't really get every toy. I don't know. I'm sure it has something to do with profits. But yeah, they don't do that here in the UK. I do get tripped up sometimes because I'm like, well, will that store have this? Will I have to go to 7 different stores? It's kind of a process for me because I'm used to having those one-stop shops. I think in the end, it probably works out better the way the UK does it. Number 3, have the right to vote and own a gun and join the armed forces before being able to drink. Now, in my opinion, if you decide that 18 is an adult, then 18 should be an adult, period. And if you decide as a society that 21 is an adult, then 21 should be an adult, period, across the board. And for the British people, period is full stop. You shouldn't be able to join the armed forces and not be able to have a drink. If you're willing to put your life on the line, if you're willing to be sent overseas and possibly never come back, you should be able to have a drink. Now, in all fairness, I know a lot of military people who get served regardless. Especially if you're in uniform, most people aren't going to deny you a drink even if you're underage because we're just too patriotic in most cases. The whole idea of like they wouldn't be able to really go and get liquor if they were in plain civilian clothes is just absolutely ridiculous and beyond me. And the fact that you're old enough to make a very monumental decision like voting for somebody, but you aren't able in a full capacity to make a decision of whether or not you can have a beer makes no sense to me. But in America, it's normal. And Americans don't really know the difference and don't really understand why people think it's weird. I used to be one of those, but now I'm not. And I definitely look back on it and I'm like, it's totally weird. Number 4, tipping culture. So tipping culture is one of those things that's, from my understanding, it's left over from slave times. Once the emancipation came in the United States, there was a lot of slaves that were still working. They weren't allowed to be property anymore, but the employers didn't have an obligation to pay them. So they would work and hope that the patrons would tip them. And unfortunately, that culture has spilled over into modern civilization in the US in a certain level. Now, the reason I say that is because when I was a server, I made $2.17 an hour because I got tipped. And let me tell you something, getting that tip is not a reliable source of income because Americans are stingy and fickle. And basically, you could have done everything right at the table and they just didn't like your attitude or didn't think you were fast enough or the burger wasn't warm enough or whatever and end up not leaving you a very good tip. And here in the UK, they don't really do tipping as far as like a common cultural thing. Obviously, if you're in a restaurant and they go above and beyond, you can leave a tip. And if you're in the service industry, like someone who's delivering groceries or food, someone who's doing your hair, something like that, you would normally leave a tip as well. That is acceptable in the culture. But it's, again, a gratuity, not an expected wage like it is in America. It's a really, really outdated, antiquated culture, in my opinion. Number 5, the obsessive patriotism. I'm laughing when I'm saying this because I was so caught up in it for a really long time. And looking back on it now, I would see how absolutely ridiculous it is. That whole rah-rah America mentality about every little thing, like an American football game or something, having to play the national anthem before every major event, whether it be sporting, concerts, it's everything. It's kind of crazy. And even down to like school events. Like I remember in high school and junior high, which is basically like secondary school equivalent here, that they would do it before events. And so even as a kid, like you're just exposed to it everywhere. So you don't really understand that it's not normal to be overly patriotic with flags everywhere all the time. And that it really, outside of the United States, it's not something that most people do unless there's a really big event like the World Cup. Here we are making sure that we have our flags out and the national anthem being sung for like a kid's t-ball game. Number 6, peanut butter as a staple in everybody's pantry. Yeah, y'all don't eat a lot of peanut butter. You can get it. There are some people who I've met like it over here. Not that many though. But in America, like everybody eats peanut butter and jelly. Unless you have an allergy. I don't know anyone that doesn't like it. There's people that are like, oh, I prefer chunky over smooth, but you still kind of like peanut butter in some sense. I remember thinking how weird my partner was that he didn't like peanut butter, and how weird everyone else in America thought he was for not liking peanut butter. I still kind of think it's weird because I love peanut butter and I think it's delicious, but it's just not the staple that it is in America, and Americans don't understand it. That is one I have still an American mentality on. I still don't understand why you don't like it, and how you can eat something like a Marmite. Awful. Number 7, feeling like you have to overwork on everything. I did talk about this in another video, how it's very much a hustle culture. And in some instances, particularly the way the economy is now in America, it's kind of a necessity in order to survive. But that overwork mentality has been around forever, at least as long as I've been alive. It is actually understood that when you want to make a good impression at a new job, you show up 15 minutes early, you stay 15 minutes late. You volunteer to take on extra work, even if you're not getting paid for it. And when you're on vacation or you have time off, you're expected to still kind of check in, especially if you're in a mid-manager level or higher. That's crazy. If you're hired to be at a place from 9 to 5 with an hour lunch, you should only be expected to work from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. minus that hour lunch. You shouldn't be expected to come in 15 minutes early or stay 15 minutes late. Shouldn't be expected to work on any time off. And you certainly shouldn't be expected to do anything extra that you're not getting paid for. Definitely an American thing. For some reason, they think that that leaves a good impression and that'll prevent them from being fired. At the end of the day, if your salary is the difference between them being in the red or the green, they're gonna fire you. No matter how good you do, no matter how many times you came in early, no matter how much extra work you took. So my mentality is don't do any more than you have to, don't do any more than you're getting paid for. But I guarantee there's gonna be Americans that leave really horrible negative comments on that point specifically in the comments below, because it's just a mentality that you are expected to work extra and be happy about it. Really glad the UK has a better work-life balance and it's not really expected. Number 8, the idea of gun ownership being so casual. Now, I honestly could talk about gun ownership in America in probably every video. I do try to limit myself because I know it's a very touchy, controversial subject. I still will never understand how Americans can think that the right to own weapons outweighs someone else's life, especially when you're talking about children's lives. I don't have a problem with people owning guns. I don't have a problem with people shooting guns in controlled situations. And in America, hunting is legal as long as you're being safe about it and you have the proper credentials and the proper checks ahead of time. that you are safe to have it mentally, physically, psychologically, then I don't really have a problem with it. But I do, as an American, think there are limits to that right, just like any other right and privilege that you have in the world. If you have limits to what you can do with a driving license, then you should have limits to what you can do with a gun owner's license, in my opinion. I don't understand how it's normal to be so casual about gun ownership. No one outside of America thinks it's okay or normal to give a 9-year-old a rifle. I laugh because I see it's so common from how I grew up and what I've seen in my lifetime in America, but I also am so nervous and uncomfortable talking about it because I know the destruction that it causes in America and the controversy that it causes in America. I hope someday that Americans will be able to come around to the fact that it's not normal and that something should be done about it, but it is an unfortunate truth that that is something that is part of everyday life in the US. Number 9, medical ads on television. It's something that doesn't happen here in the UK, so it is kind of funny to talk about with British people. We have drug companies that actually advertise their latest and greatest drugs, and they talk to you about the benefits of it. They mention very briefly, very quickly at the end what possible side effects could be, and usually it comes with some kind of tagline along the lines of, make sure you ask your doctor about this. And they are incessant. They're on every channel with just about every program. The pharmaceutical companies in America are just given free rein. They are part of the very wealthy business interests in America, and they spend a lot of time and money lobbying our lawmakers to allow drugs. They spend a lot of time and effort with the Food and Drug Administration, which is the federal overseer of food and drugs in the United States, in order to allow things to go to the market and be over the counter. And they also work very closely with the medical community in order to prescribe those that are not over the counter. And the fact that you have to advertise on television to consumers who don't have medical licenses, who don't have any kind of pharmaceutical background or degree, to ask their doctor about these medications is kind of crazy to me. Really, the doctor should be the one proposing the medication. But in any event, it is something that happens in America often and is completely normal as an American to grow up seeing on television. And even on, streaming services and things like YouTube, you have medical ads throughout the throughout your watching experience. That is something that's very, very normal in the United States. Speaking of healthcare, number 10 is going bankrupt because you got sick. It is another sad fact in America that there are so many people that end up losing everything they've worked for their entire lives because they have some kind of life-threatening illness or injury to which they can't work any longer, or they have all of these medical bills that need to get paid. Children aren't even covered in these situations if they get something like cancer. Their parents still have to pay for all of their treatments. And there's so many Americans that lose everything, all of their nest egg, all of the college funds, etc., everything, and end up actually going bankrupt because somebody in their family got sick. It's a terrible situation, in my opinion. It's something Americans should not have to face and should not have to deal with, but unfortunately, it's another one of those things that's very normal for most Americans to have to deal with, and you just don't have to deal with it outside of living in the US. Most people outside of the US think that the privatized healthcare system that forces people to go bankrupt for getting sick is absolutely ridiculous and not normal and shouldn't be. And I agree. Number 11 is another one that's a little bit controversial, but I'm gonna tell you about it anyway. Taking a newborn baby to daycare. Because of the privatized medical system in America, you only get 6 weeks off after having a baby. There are some states that have paid family leave at a state level that you can apply for, but in those cases, it's usually only another 6 weeks, so 12 weeks at the most, 3 months. Here in the UK, you get between 6 months and a year off most of it paid. I know there are no other areas in Europe, other countries in Europe, that you can get like up to 4 years off or something along those lines. There's so many babies that I saw that are 6 weeks old that look newborn. They look like they just got born. They just got home from the hospital and they're in daycare. Because the women have to go back to work because they have to pay for those medical bills. They have to pay for something and they don't have a choice. And they're not going to get paid if they don't go back to work. And another sad, upsetting thing that Americans have to deal with, they think is normal. That shouldn't be. But it is the truth. And it's something that comes along with the privatized healthcare system that a lot of people need to know about because it shouldn't be normal. And finally, number 12 is a little bit lighter. Kids knowing what college they want to go to before they even hit high school. So as I mentioned before, high school is like secondary school here in Britain. And could you imagine like a 9 or 10-year-old, 11-year-old knowing what college they're going to go to, where they're going to go to university? So I'm sure that there are some instances where you're bred and you know you're going to go to this university or anything like that. But most people have no idea what they're doing and where they're going to go for any kind of secondary schooling or furthering their education after graduation. Even in high school, like even at like 16, 17 years old, the amount of pressure that is put on kids at such a young age as far as education is concerned in America is extremely normal. However, it is something that shouldn't be. It should be allowed to be kids, and that pressure should not be on them at such a young age. I remember my daughter having anxiety for a really long time when she was still in elementary school and early junior high about like hitting certain grades and getting certain marks on tests in order to make sure that she got to a good college. And I was like, you're 10 years old. You shouldn't be thinking about that. Why are you thinking about college? You should be thinking about like coming home and going to gymnastics class or whatever is next on your list. There's a huge emphasis on education in America. I'm not saying that education is not important. I do believe education is extremely important, but I don't think that it should come with all of the pressures. I think it should come more with a emphasis on developing the person to be fulfilled and to be able to find something that is going to bring them some kind of value in their life, as well as bringing value to society and the community around them. I don't think it should be such an emphasis on you have to do this and you have to go to college to study one of these 5 things, or if you don't get into these top universities, then you're somehow a failure in some way. I just don't think those pressures should exist, but then fortunately they do, very much so in America. So there you have it, guys. Those are 12 things that only Americans really focus on, but they think is normal, and outside of the United States usually are not normal, or at least at a much smaller scale. Really, just like any other culture, America just needs to reassess some things in their priorities and realize that, they can do better. But that being said, luckily we're in the UK and hope a lot of these things we don't have to worry about. I'm really interested to hear your takes, and if you have any comments about things that we've talked about, let me know as well. Please hit the like button on your way out. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.